Hey friends, welcome back to another subscription box tutorial. You guys know me, my name's Emma LaFave, and today we are taking a look at the June subscription box. So let's open it up and dive right in. Okay guys, so we are on to our June watercolor subscription box. I can't believe it, halfway through the year already. This one is fun, so we are going to be doing, as you can see, some oranges, but let's open our box and see what's inside. Okay, so first, the card. This is the image we're going to be doing. I did do two versions of this where I did like a little peach background, so we might add that with this tutorial. And then obviously the information on the back. For our brushes this month, we have a 6 filbert and a 2 filbert. So 2 filberts this month. Very versatile brushes, a lot of fun to use. We have our 4 half pan watercolors. Let's check out our colors this month. We have Sepia, Quinacridone Gold, Quinacridone Magenta, and Hooker's Green Dark. And our free gift this month is this fun little pencil case that you can use to put your pencils from last month in, just to protect them while traveling around. You can put your kneaded eraser in there, tie it up. It's not meant for your brushes. These ones are just meant for your pencils or fine liners or whatever you have. That's why it's small, but it has our fun design on it, and that's our free gift. Then, of course, you should have your tracing paper and our image today, which I'm actually not going to use this to trace today because this is actually a fairly easy image to trace. I'm going to show you how to draw this, and then we have our watercolor paper. So let's jump in and get started and get to know our supplies. Okay, so getting to know our paint colors and our brushes. I have already put my new paints in my palette, so now I have 6 months of paints. I know some of you have started in May, so you only have one other set, but here's our new set here. If you are wondering about pigment information, I think I mentioned this in the last video. They are all on the labels, so if you want to keep your labels, I know it's really small, but they are there. And then I've already wet and just kind of rinsed off my brushes to get that hard kind of glue that they put on just to make them stay straight during transportation. And we're ready to start. So I'm just going to start by wetting up my paints. It's always best to activate them before you start. And I'm going to use the size 6 filbert to swatch them. So just wetting up my brush. Let's start by looking at how these colors look on paper. So this is the gold, the Quinacridone Gold, which is a really beautiful kind of like warm yellow, and it's very nice and transparent. Then we have our Quinacridone Magenta, which is a beautiful pink. Look at that pink. It's beautiful. And then our Hooker's Green Dark, or Hooker's Dark Green, which is a great versatile green for mixing. And then lastly, our Sepia, which is a nice brown. Okay, so these are our colors, and we're going to, I'm just going to wet them so you can see how they kind of lighten up towards the bottom here. It's always good to kind of just get to know your colors by seeing how they are when they're very nice and saturated with lots of pigment and then just watered down. Kind of gives you an idea. For lighter values, just adding a little bit of water, seeing how they blend out, like so. Okay, so let's get to mixing. You guys know this is my favorite part. Okay, so let's start with our gold. So we're going to mix it with 3 of the other colors. So I'm just going to put them in 3 separate areas. 1, 2, and 3. Let's mix it with our magenta to start. This is going to be kind of like our color for the oranges. So you get a really nice bright orange here. Obviously, if you mix more magenta in there, you'll get a darker, kind of more corally color, which is really nice. You can just keep mixing more and more just to make it darker, and you can kind of get like almost like this red color. Because I don't know if you know this, but mixing magenta and yellow, you get red. I'm just going to mix a bit more, see if we can get a darker red. like so. Okay. And then obviously if you mix a lot of the gold with just a tiny bit of the magenta, you get more of an orangey color. Okay. So that's mixing those. Another really beautiful mixture is the green with the gold. So you can get another variation of our green here. Okay, and obviously you can go a bit darker. Like it's way different than just it on its own. This is a nice bright vibrant green. Or you can go really, really gold heavy and have like a green gold. This is almost olivey just because it has that warmer tone to the gold. It has that red undertone, so it gives it that muted kind of olive color. And then you know what? You can always just, why not add some magenta in there? Get that more olivey color. You can get another brown. Okay, and just keep mixing different variations of this. Like, look how many greens you can make, right? All right, let's grab our brown, our sepia, and mix it. Get this really nice golden brown, a different kind of darker golden brown. And you can just keep mixing and mixing like I was saying. Maybe really, really gold heavy. Just some beautiful mixes. Okay, and then let's try to mix some of our pink, our magenta, with our green and then our sepia. Let's see all of the possibilities here. So green and pink. Look at that. It makes this like darker purple. You want to make it even more purpley, you just add more pink. Like you can get this dark magenta because remember, pink and red are, no, sorry, red and green are contrasting colors, and pink magenta is another form of red. So when you add little bits of each to the contrasting color, you will get a muted tone. So this is creating a muted kind of darker magenta, which is awesome. And then if you add just a little bit of the magenta to the green, so let's go green heavy on this, you'll get a darker, more muted green, which is awesome. I love mixing like a purpley pink with a green. And then let's mix our brown with our magenta, see what we can get there. We get this really nice kind of warm brown. Or again, kind of like another muted pink. So many possibilities here, so much fun. And then take into account that if you use more water, you're getting a different value, and it's just another array of colors. So many color possibilities here with this month. Let's be honest, every month. So much fun. And now let's get to know our brushes. Okay, so our brushes are filberts this month. I believe we've already had a filbert, but we have two more like smaller detailed one. This tiny one I really love for details. And then this is just a great versatile kind of number 6. So again, when we're getting to know our colors, I just like to, make strokes, see how fat I can make our lines, see how thin I can make the lines. Like, look how thin you can make these lines just by turning it on its side. You can make them kind of medium. These are really great. Surprisingly, filberts are great for flowers, but I didn't really do like a flower heavy tutorial this month, which you think I would have with the filberts, but they were actually really great for what we're going to do today. So you can use them if you wanted to do like a floral piece, but they're just a lot of fun. So I like taking my filberts and just kind of pressing down and then swooping to the side, create kind of like petal shapes. And then for our small one, look, like I was saying, for detail and stuff, again, you're just getting to know how thick you can make it, how thin you can make it. And then you can make like the tiniest little leaves if you want. You can just press down and then turn it slightly. Like so easy. If you leave it flat and you kind of lift up like that, it makes like a blunt stop. So if you want to have that pointed edge, you just gotta twist it to the side. twist your brush. And you'll get those little leaves. You can make some easy, like tiny little flowers just by using like the tip of this brush. So cute. And then even just like little centers of flowers, if you wanted to, you can just make the tiniest little marks for the stamen of any flower. This is like almost the perfect shape. So much fun, okay? So play around with your brushes a little bit, see what you can do with them, and then get ready to jump into our painting. Okay, so for our painting today, we are doing these oranges, like I said. You can use your tracing template for sure. I don't know if I actually missed that line on your papers. Hopefully not, but if not, you could just finish the circle. But for this one, just because I find it fairly easy and there's some good tips that I can mention for drawing, I want to draw this out with you. And the reason why I put this box behind, like I said, when I did the original, I did this like peach background, which I think I'm going to do with you. If you want to just leave it white like this, you can totally do that. But if you want to add a different color background, you definitely can as well. So I'm not going to trace it, but if you'd like to trace it, you can totally do so. Now, if you're not tracing it, you can just create the little box if you want to, or you can use some painter's tape, which I like to use. Mine is just from the dollar store. There may be some painter's tape coming in a future box that you should keep an eye out for. So I'm just going to start by taping this down. And there's two reasons why I use painter's tape. And that is because, one, I like to use them for creating a border like this. And two, if I'm doing a water heavy piece, taping it down like the edges to a table or a board of some sort will actually help keep it from warping. In this sense, we don't need to keep it from warping necessarily, just because it's not going to be too water heavy. But in future paintings, when you're doing like a really wet background or something, you're going to want to tape it down to something just because it just keeps it from being all wavy and warping. Okay, so here is our paper. We have our brushes and everything. You can grab your pencil from your new pencil case and your eraser, and we can begin. Okay, so the way I started this drawing, I started it with the branch, and I just went from one top corner and I just did this really loose kind of line, which is great because you don't need to have a steady hand. And I just started by going downwards just a little bit. Just keep a little bit of space before you reach the end. And then I'm going to make it a little bit thicker, like so. Okay, then I decided where I wanted to put my oranges. So I knew they all had to be on a stem. So my first one, I'm just going to grab a little stem and put it here. And then even though my oranges are behind some leaves, I'm going to draw a full circle. And when I draw circles, to make them as circular as possible, I like to go around and around until it's as perfect as I want it to be. And then I erase any lines that I don't need. So there's our first orange. And then our second orange is going to be down here. Again, doing our full circle. And I just keep my hand really loose when I'm doing this. My elbow's off the table. I don't anchor my hand down, because I find if I use my wrist, that's when my circles get wonky. I tend to lift my whole arm up, and I'll just really lightly go around in a circle. Okay, and then our last orange is actually behind this orange on the other side of the branch. So I'm going to still draw the full orange, and I'm doing this so lightly. You need a little bit space there. I feel like this needs to be a little bit bigger. You can always move it. There we go. And our other orange is behind here. Okay? Like so. Now let's place in our leaves. So let's start with the leaf over here, because this one's covering this orange. It's going to come down from a stem. And I'm just going to do a leaf kind of pointing down. Kind of make it a little jagged. Bring it down like that. Okay, and then there's a leaf behind it. Let's make this a bit bigger again. Oh. Just going to move my tape. just a tad. Extend my branch. Okay, and then we have another leaf that's like this. It's going to be behind this one. And the reason why I draw the full thing is because I find sometimes if we try to skip behind something, it doesn't always match up or line up, and it just looks weird, especially if you're doing a circle. I find if you were just trying to draw the one area, it doesn't seem to match up or look like a full circle. That's why I like to do the full shape. Then it looks just a bit more accurate. So we have the shape coming like this, like that. Okay, then we have another one down here. Okay, again, just drawing a simple leaf shape, kind of making them a bit jagged. We have one kind of coming up here. We're going to have a flower right here, which we'll do in a second. Another leaf here. I feel like I keep needing to move my tape. Redraw this leaf. And now our last little leaf here. Just have a little one kind of coming off the end. Like so. And now we can draw our flowers. Okay, so I'm going to start off with this one. I'm just going to draw a petal here, a petal here, a petal here, and then the next two are just a bit flatter because you're seeing it from a different perspective. Okay, doesn't have to be perfect. Don't worry about it. Then we're going to draw another flower here. I'm going to draw a little stem to this one. Simple kind of petal shapes. Don't worry too much about it. And then a flatter one. These last two are going to be more buds. So I'm going to have a little stem here. And then just like one kind of petal shape like that. And then it's going to have a little bit of green at the bottom there. And then last one. This one's overlapping the leaf a little bit. Again, just a simple petal shape like so. Okay, so now we have our drawing. I know it's really light, but when you do this, you want to keep it light so it's easy to erase, because now we are going to erase the lines we don't need. So any of the lines, like of the oranges that are behind leaves, this is where you erase it. And if you did it nice and light, it should be very easy to erase. You can also erase some of those lines you don't need for the circles. So if you went around doing the circles a few times, this is where you can erase those lines you don't need, so you have that kind of perfect circle shape. Okay, so now that we have our drawing, let's get painting. So the first thing I'm going to paint are my oranges, and I'm going to start by mixing my colors. So for the orange color, I am taking my gold and just a little bit of the magenta to make a really nice orange color. But actually, you know what? Let's start by doing a wash of just the gold, okay? So I'm going to start by doing a light wash of just the gold. I'm using my size 6 over the whole orange, and this will provide some of the highlights on the orange to start. Okay, so we're going to make sure it's nice and wet. You don't want it where it's so wet where it's dripping if you were to tilt it, but you want a nice wet background, because now we're going to go back in with the magenta mixture to get that more orangey tint. Okay, so anytime an object is behind another object, so this orange is behind the two leaves, you're going to get a shadow casted on that orange right behind where those two leaves are. So you might see a little bit of a highlight right down the middle. So that's where we're going to leave a little bit of this yellowy kind of gold color. So I'm just going to make sure it's all wet. Okay, if your room tends to dry your papers really fast, you want to maybe just go back over with a light wash or just a little bit of water, a little bit, to make it all evenly wet. Now I'm going to go back in with my mix with the magenta, and I'm just going to start tapping it in around the edges. And we're just going to build on with layers to make it more and more, give it more depth. Okay, you can grab a bit more magenta. And you know what, for this part I might even use my size 2 just so I can get in those little areas quite easily. Just gonna mix a bit more of my color. Okay, and we're just gonna get a nice orangey color here. And we're just blending it in there. It should all be wet, so it should blend fairly easily. If your colors are not softening and they seem really harsh, your paper might not be wet enough. So now if you see mine, you see this like yellow in the middle, and then you can see this almost definite line. My paper is wet and it's a soft line, but it's still kind of harsh. So I'm just gonna wash off my brush, just dry it on my paper towel a little bit, and just kind of blend it out so it's not as harsh. Okay, so now we have our orangey kind of color. Now I'm gonna add some brown to our orange. I'm just gonna mix a new area here just to make it a little bit darker. And I'm just gonna start tapping in a little bit of our darker mixture here. Okay, and oranges have that nice little texture on them. So you can even do some dots. And because it's still wet, it's not gonna be detailed and sharp. Especially when it dries, it will be a little bit more faded. But you should be getting a little bit of texture this way. And if you want to add a bit more of that brown, we can always do more layers afterwards as well. So don't feel like you have to do all your shading right this second. Especially if you find that your paper's starting to dry really quickly, you can always leave it and we can always go back in and then re-wet and do all the things we need to do. Okay, so there's our first orange. We'll just stop there. Okay, we can always come back and intensify it a little bit more. Let's do our next one. I'm gonna start with this one. So let's grab more of our yellowy color. Fill up the whole orange. Okay, again, making it nice and wet so we can add those other colors in and have them bleed, just making sure it's even, just going over it. Now we can grab more of that magenta mixture, start applying it. And again, our shadows, it's going to be a bit more highlighted right here where there's less covering it, and then more shadows around where the leaves are, and then this little bud. There's our orange. I'm gonna switch to my smaller one now. Grabbing some of that darker mixture with the brown. Just tapping around here. Around the bottom, around over here where this bud is. Bud, not butt. Just tapping. like so. All right, just gonna bring in some of those little dots like that. Okay, so because the next orange is behind this orange and it's actually touching, we're gonna stay away from that because we don't want the two to bleed into each other. We wanna keep them separate. Okay, so let's work on some of the leaves. Okay, so before we continue with the leaves, I don't know if you can tell, but we have a new painting here. This is not what I just did. So because technology is oh so fun, I say that sarcastically, I had finished this painting and this whole tutorial and it didn't record it. My computer totally messed up, so I have the whole end of the painting that just went basically into the garbage. So I just now had to redraw everything and redo these first oranges so we could continue. So if it looks a little bit different, I'm sorry, but it's basically the same thing. You gotta love technology, and I want to be real with you. I want to show you, you know, the real struggles that goes into making these tutorials. So hopefully you guys don't mind, but let's continue. So like I said, we are going to be doing the leaves now. My oranges are now dry, but if yours are still wet, we are going to continue with other leaves and stuff that wouldn't be touching those wet areas. We don't want them to bleed into each other. So I'm just going to take my size 6. I'm going to take some of that gold. I'm going to bring it down here and we're going to create a nice light green for some of these leaves. So when you're doing a painting like this and you have images or subjects that are overlapping each other, so like you can see, you have a leaf here that is in front of 2 oranges. You have a leaf that is behind this leaf. They're going to vary in values as well as colors and shades and stuff like that. So this leaf behind, if you look at the reference photo, is a lot darker because this leaf would be casting its shadow. We have this kind of shading over here on this orange because this leaf is in front of it. So that's something you want to think about when you are creating pieces like this on your own. So I'm going to start off, always start light to dark anyway, but I'm going to start off with some of these leaves. This leaf is in front. It doesn't have anything casting a shadow on it, so we're going to start with a fairly light kind of olivey color. Like I said, mixing that kind of goldish color with the green. I love this green. It's so pretty. Just doing a nice wash over it. Then, while it's still wet, I'm going to grab some more of this green, a little bit of the brown, and I'm just going to go around the edges while it's still wet so they blend kind of nicely together. And then just like a little vein kind of down the middle. And it should be kind of blurry. Now, if your lines, like it's still blurry and blended, but if it still looks a little too harsh, you can always wash off your brush, dry it on your paper towel a bit, and just like blend it out so it's not too harsh of a line. You can also just add more color in there. I find with leaves like this, it just looks nice when you have different variations of green in there. It doesn't have to be, you know, solid. It just gives it a bit more texture, a bit more life. So just kind of have fun with it. So mix from light to dark, and just experiment. So I'm just going to add some more darkness in there. And we will, once it's completely dry, add more dark lines on top, so they'll be a bit sharper. But these, because we're doing a wet on wet, they're going to be a little bit more blurry. I like to add darkness to the edges like this. And I'm just trying to, I don't want it to be totally smooth. I want it to have a little bit of, you know, flair to it. Okay. So that's a fairly light one. Then we would do another one that's not touching anything wet. So assuming your oranges are still wet, I'm not going to do this one or this one. Let's do the leaf that's behind. And because that one's behind, I'm going to start with the darker green wash, and I'm just going to go over the whole thing. Like this. Okay, and then I'm going to grab some more. I just mix the green and the brown, and I'm going to tap it in kind of behind this other leaf because it would be casting a bit of a shadow. Just blend it out a bit more around the edges. like so. And if it's easier to switch to your smaller brush to do this, go for it. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. We don't have to do the vein on it just yet. This one is just going to be overall a bit darker. Okay, so let's do another one that a wet area is not touching. That would be this one. I also have this one a little bit like slightly darker. I'm going to start off kind of like a medium green. I can't believe I had to do this again. I was so mad, guys. So mad. Okay. And then we're going to grab our darker green, a little bit more brown in there. Go around the edge. Make a little bit of a line where that vein would be, like so. And you know what we can also do is we can also create the stem. So I'm just going to take some green, maybe a bit of brown. Make it like a more of a browny green and just do the branch kind of coming down. And you can connect some of the stems that are already there. And we will do a little bit more detail on that one after. So you can just add some of the stems now if you like. Like that. Okay. And then we will move on to another leaf that is not touching a wet area. So let's do this one. So I'm just going to take some green. Actually, let's move to my smaller brush just because it's a smaller leaf. And I don't want it to be too difficult to go around these buds. Grab our darker green, brown. I should have mixed it in the other area. That's okay. Make it a little bit darker behind where this bud is. Do a little bit of a vein here. A little bit of darkness on the underside here. Like so. Okay. Now we can't do the orange because it's touching a wet area. My two oranges are dry, so I'm going to do this leaf next. Just always make sure that your areas are dry before you paint next to it. Okay, you don't want them to mix or bleed into each other if they are still wet. So again, just starting off light. Like that. I'm going to switch to my smaller brush. Grab some more color. Start to go around the edges a bit more. It's not totally dark, it's like more medium green. Then I'm going to grab some darker green. Do my little vein here. Just darken up the side just a little bit. Doesn't have to be that dark. Like that's pretty dark. But you can make it a little bit lighter if you'd rather. Just darkening up the sides a bit. Like so, and we can always come back and add more shadow and shading after. Okay, so before we move on to any other areas, like the other leaves or the other orange, I'm going to do the flowers because they're not really touching anything that's too wet. And this should be dry by the time I get there. So to do this, I'm going to grab my pink and I'm just going to use pink. You can, if you'd like, to use pink and maybe a little bit of the gold and make like peach flowers. What I did originally when I did this painting is I did this and I scanned it, and then I also did one with a peach background that looked really pretty. So I might do that at the end of this. In that case, if I was doing a peach background, I wouldn't do peach flowers just because they'd be too similar. So I'm going to keep my flowers nice and pink, but it's totally up to you. Okay, so I'm just grabbing my pink, starting off with a light wash. I'm just going to go over the whole flower with this light wash of pink to start. Then, while it's still wet, I'm just going to grab some more pink. And I'm just going to bring little lines kind of coming towards the center right here. Not too much, just a little for a bit of shading while it's still wet. You can go around the tips if you want. Like that. Let's do the other ones. Again, grabbing more pink, bringing some little lines into the center here. You can go around the edge. Make it lighter. I'm going to grab a bit more pink, make it a bit darker towards the base and lighter towards the tip. Same with this one, just make sure that your leaf is dry so they don't bleed into each other. Then again, just bringing more pink into that base. Okay, and then we'll let those completely dry. Okay, so now let's just make sure everything is completely dry before we move on. Okay, now that our image is dry, we can go back in and do our final orange and the leaf and then some details. So I noticed there's just a little bit of a white gap here with this flower, so I'm just going to fill that in. Okay, and now let's do this leaf and then this orange. So again, starting with our lighter green because we want it to really pop because it's in front of this darker leaf that's behind. So we want to make sure there's nice contrast of it being lighter. Like that. Grabbing our dark green, adding our vein here, adding a bit of darkness to the side. Like so. Let's grab our smaller brush. A little bit more darkness. So, and now let's do the orange. So again, I'm going to grab my gold. I'm trying to make sure there's no green in there. And I'm just going to go over the whole thing with this orangey gold or yellowy gold, I don't know. And if it's easier to go around with your smaller brush, you can always switch to your smaller brush. I just want to get these bigger areas with the bigger brush. I just find it dries a little, or you can get more done, and so there's less chance of it drying, so you can add in those shadows. That's why I use my bigger brush. Just try and be careful as you're going around. It is a little tricky with the bigger brush. And because this orange is behind, you know, some of the flowers, the leaves, all that, it's going to be a bit darker. We're going to have a bit more shading to it. Okay, so I'm just going to mix all of the color I have up here that's a bit more on the orangey side. I'm going to add a bit more magenta. I'm going to start adding this orange, just tapping it, making it darker. Well, it's pretty orange. And I want to dull it down a bit. I'm just moving my water over. So I just washed off my brush, dried it a little bit. I'm just going to blend it out just so it's not so harsh. I'm going to grab my smaller brush. And then a bit more of the magenta, a bit more of the gold, a bit of the brown. And I'm just going to start adding shadow around this side. And under here. Like that. Tap in some of the little dots for some texture. Like that. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but it's getting a little bit lost behind this one. They're looking a little bit more the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it dry, and then I'm going to go back in and add a bit more darkness after, because they look kind of the same. You don't really see that definitive line. So I'm going to let it dry first, and then we'll come back to this orange. Okay, so while we're waiting for that to dry, we can start doing a little bit of the detail on the leaves and the flowers. So for the flowers, we're going to take that mixture where we mixed a little bit of magenta with a bit of the green. And remember, it just kind of darkens that magenta. And I'm just going to do some little centers like this. Okay, I'm going to wash some of that off. And I'm just going to kind of go around the petals, create some lines. Maybe like just a bit of a shadow at the bottom here. Just separating some of those petals just a little bit. Have some lines at the top. And then I like to do some more lines here coming from the base. Do some coming from the top. This gives it a little bit of texture and shadow. Can even add a little bit more, just the magenta, just for a bit of brightness. Have some brighter areas there if you'd like. Like that. And I think I'm going to add just a bit of green to the bottom of some of these buds, these two. Okay. Now for the leaves that are dry, just making sure that they're dry, I'm going to take some of that darker green and I'm just going to do a bit more. You can do the veins. For this one back here, I might just add a bit more darkness. See that? Wash off my brush, dry it, and just blend it out just a bit. You can add a vein on this one. You can add a bit more shadow just with a lighter bit. Just some kind of shadowy marks. Same with this one. And you can blend it out, you don't have to. I feel like it makes it a little bit more stylized when you don't blend it out. Like that. Like so. And then lastly on the branch, I'm just going to add a little bit more darkness on the bottom side. Like that. A little bit more shadow around here. Okay. And then we have done all the detail on the leaves and the flowers. Now, lastly, these oranges, if you want to add a little bit more, you totally can. In the first one I did, this orange was a lot lighter. So if you find that maybe your oranges aren't as vibrant or as dark as you'd like them, one thing I love about this gold color is that it's very nice and transparent. If you just kind of want to brighten everything up a little bit, you could just do like a glaze over top and it just brightens it up with that yellow tone underneath. It's beautiful. So you can always do that. And then while it's still wet, if you want to add some of those textured kind of orange dots, you can. Okay, if it's a bit too much like that is, I can just kind of blend it out. Gonna add a little bit more brown to the shadows of my orange. Like that. Just wash off your brush and just blend it out if there's any harsh lines. And then this one, like I said, once it's dry, which it's pretty much dry right now, I'm going to add a bit more brown to my orange. And I'm going to make this a lot darker. Not a lot, but like enough. So it's a really browny kind of rusty orange. Actually, let's get our smaller brush so we can really get in those little details. And then over here, I'm gonna add that brown, wash off my brush, and then just blend out the edges. Like so. And then this area over here, because it's behind. Oops, too much water. Wash off my brush, dry it, blend it out. Okay. And then again, if you just want to add more texture, totally can, up to you. Okay, so there is the piece. Finally finished it, still recording. Okay, now it's totally up to you. If you want to leave it white, you can. But I'm going to add a background to it, and I'm just going to have a nice light peachy color. So I'm just going to mix a bit of my gold and my magenta, a little bit more magenta-y, and I'm going to water it down, and I'm just going to apply it, maybe a little bit more pinky, to the background. I just found it looked so pretty when I did it, really, really light, and I'm just keep grabbing more water. If you notice on the box, the background inside is that peachy color. That's kind of where it came from. So just adding more water to really lighten it up. And if you have some fun like bleeds or blooms or whatever, some textured marks, I kind of like that look. It doesn't have to be all nice and flat. You can just have fun with it. Again, it's totally up to you. If you wanted to grab a different color from your palette, you know, like do a blue background, you could. With the orange, that would also look really, really nice because they're contrasting colors. But again, it's your piece. Do it however you like. I just kind of like this peachy vibe. But nice and light. It just, because you have that nice contrast from the bold image and then the light and airy background. So just have fun with it. And there we go. There is our piece. So let's take off the tape. This will provide a really nice border if you do the background. I don't know why. I just love this peach color as the background. Just reminds me of summer. And there we go. There is our June subscription box piece. Thank you guys so much for your support in purchasing these boxes. I really hope you're loving them, and I'll see you guys next month for a new tutorial. Have a great day. Bye.